All right, folks, here we go. Last video of the year. Something you're familiar with, which is terrorism. Of course, terrorism is exactly what it sounds like. It's using violence to hurt others, okay, or to force change of others. And terrorism takes on many forms. We've seen terrorism mainly focused on religion in the last roughly 15 years. And of course, religious terrorism has been going on for a long time. You could even really make an argument for the Crusades being the first religious terrorist activity that was done by the Crusaders moving into the Middle East. However, terrorism also takes forms of nationalism, and it's done to gain independence for people as well. So, when we look at terrorism, there's definitely two types of terrorism. There's international terrorism and there's domestic terrorism, and you've seen both in your lifetime. There's been a lot of instances of international terrorism. You've seen recently with the Paris terrorist attacks and the Brussels terrorist attack recently, and of course domestic terrorist attacks, the Boston bombing and the Boston Marathon. Those are domestic terrorist attacks as well. All right. The reasons for terrorism, there's two real reasons. One is religious. That's obviously the big one, which we're familiar with. The other one is really gaining independence or change. When we look at the Irish Republican Army, that's it's kind of a combination of both, but it's really looking for the independence part, which we're going to focus on here in 1 second. Okay, your methods and targets: bombs, bullets, chemical attacks. That's a big one. We're seeing very creative versions of bombs being created. And of course, crowded areas, important symbols, World Trade Center, Pentagon, Brussels Airport, Paris Stadium, trying to attack during a soccer game, hitting an area like in Paris where they went to the theater where musicians were playing. You see this very commonly. I hate to say it, but get more bang for your buck. You're going to kill more people. The Boston Marathon, the attempt there, of course, with thousands and thousands of runners during that time period, people watching, of course. You also have an increase in cyber terrorism. This has been a big issue, with the whole Edward Snowden thing going on. The NSA showing how much, we're paying attention to other countries, but also cyber terrorist attacks, especially in places like China, that are coming back against the United States. The group Anonymous trying to stop some of this, but also acting as a terrorist agency in a way, is also very evident in cyber terrorism. This is a new thing. We've taken major safeguards to protect us, and it's only getting more difficult. All right, some terrorist groups we gotta know about. The big ones really you have to know. Obviously, in Afghanistan, you're familiar with the Taliban and Al Qaeda. The Taliban being the organization that stems from the Mujahideen, and Al Qaeda being the actual terrorist organization under Osama bin Laden. Islamic Jihad is one group. Hamas and Hezbollah are groups that are anti-Israel. Which is why they are major terrorist groups, or considered terrorist groups by the EU, the United States, and by Israel. The Hamas will work within the constructs of political realm. However, they are still terrorist activities, terrorist groups. And then, of course, the Irish Republican Army, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's trying to create a Republic of Ireland that is a combined Ireland and Northern Ireland. Now, they've come to an agreement in 1998, which was called the Good Friday Agreement, which basically said that the IRA, which had been a major Catholic and nationalistic organization trying to unify the two countries and rid Ireland, the island of Ireland, from British rule, into one. But remember, in Northern Ireland you have Protestants, and of course in the Republic of Ireland you have Catholics. And this group really works mainly in Northern Ireland, but they've come to work on a more peaceful terms recently. Of course, they're still considered a terrorist group by world declaration. However, you see them working in a much more peaceful way. All right, Al Qaeda operating in Europe and Africa. Of course, that's now turning into ISIS, the extension into ISIS. You have Japan had nerve gas attacks in the mid-90s. So these terrorist organizations are trying to make major changes or make religious changes across the world and really hurt those powerful countries. It's kind of put places like us on alert. Okay, and then last big kind of terrorist activity is the narco-terrorism, which is the drug trafficking in Latin America. It's not just Mexico into the United States. It's also El Salvador and some of those Central American countries that are really becoming major issues and that we're having to watch because of the amount of movement. MS-13 and gang wars, that is all narco-terrorism that's moved into this country and all over the western half of the world.